All right, good afternoon, everyone. How's the energy after the lunch? I know most of you might be ready to, take a quick nap maybe in the auditorium, but trust me, I'll try my best not to let that happen, and give you enough about what's coming up. So all of those folks who are just peeping through the doors, please feel free to come in as the session is starting. All of you are already here. You don't have to turn back and look to see who is peeping. All right. So thanks for being here. It's always great to share some of the learnings around open source and what all is happening in the world of open source and GitHub here in Open Source India. So a quick intro. I'm Karan, and I lead international developer relations at GitHub. So my team and I work on supporting developer ecosystems, communities in various parts of the world, which includes India, Latin America, Brazil, and other parts of the regions, where we work with all of the stakeholders in open source and help them be successful, be it developers, be it students, be it startups or enterprises, academia, government, etc., and just help them when it comes to open source and how you can be a better developer, etc., and a whole lot of things. All right, now one quick question before I get started. How many of you are thinking, wait, what's GitHub? Anyone? Feel free in case you are thinking that. No worries, I can help you address that. It just helps me. Sorry? Okay, great. Thank you. Which is actually what I wanted to go against. But that was what GitHub was when it first launched. So if you go into archive.org and look at what GitHub was, it was social code hosting. Meant to be a place where you can have your Git repositories and collaborate with everyone on open source or various different ways. All right, so this is what GitHub used to look like back in 2008 when it was launched. But today GitHub is a lot more than that, a lot more than a repository where you can host your interfaces, or you can host your repositories, etc. So the GitHub of today is a complete AI-powered developer platform to really build, scale, and deliver secure software. All right, an entire integrated platform that's powered by AI for developers, for organizations, and for open source as well. And when I say this is what it is, it's not just a tagline, but there are multiple layers to how GitHub as a platform makes this happen. So just to again give a very quick overview of what this looks like, you can kind of break down what the GitHub platform is like today into multiple layers. There is, of course, the scale of the ecosystem and the community which is out over there, which is again, powered by security as well, and also helps you securely code. And also largely helps developers and your teams to be productive, collaborate better, and the entire platform again is where it's powered by AI. All right, and there's a whole lot of integrations and APIs and everything else that happens today. So while of course a whole lot of the collaboration aspects of GitHub is still core to how developers work within their teams, there is a lot more to it when it comes to security and scale and collaboration and whatnot, etc. So that's a quick overview in case you were not aware of what GitHub is like today. But this is not what I'm going to be talking about. What I really want to talk about is really open source and how open source is really impacting the way our lives, our daily lives, and also developers alike. So I want to share an interesting stat. So sometime around 10 years ago, there were around 2.8 million developers on GitHub, and that was, you can think of as the scale of the community who were building a whole lot of open source and collaborating, etc. However, if you just fast forward to today, that's more than 100 million developers on GitHub. Okay, that's really, really huge. And so just a quick thing over here. How many of you can draw an analogy to how big 100 million is? Any wild guesses? What is 100 million equal to? Thoughts? Well, let's just say GitHub, if the number of developers on GitHub were a country, it would be larger than Germany, which is, I think, approximately around 83 million, 84 million or so. All right. So that's really the scale of how open source is growing and how developers really are innovating and contributing and building on open source. All right. So so there's a lot that's happening, and in just in the course of this 10 years, there is a tremendous growth when it comes to open source, and a whole lot more that's that's happening. So, however, there is still a very big notion amongst many people that open source is just just for developers. It is just helping a lot of developers get better with with their own software, their own ways of building software, etc. But I want to tell you that that's not just the case, because open source is impacting every aspect of life today. Now, many might think that, oh, all right, fine, like you can say that, okay, everything is impacting everything in life today, etc. But I want to give you a few very concrete examples, including what's happening in India and also what's happening in rest of the world as well, as to how just the power of open source and community is impacting everyday life. All right. So just a few examples that I want to share here is, how many of you recognize what this is? Well, so this was the NASA Ingenuity helicopter that NASA sent to Mars. All right, and this made use heavily open source software. All right. And in fact, we collaborated with JPL at NASA to really look at what all open source software was used to make this helicopter fly in the atmosphere of Mars. And then we kind of got all of the data as to which are the specific versions of software they're using, what are the developers and contributors who contributed to that version of the software, and recognize them with a badge on GitHub as well, that their contributions to a certain specific open source software helped fly this helicopter in Mars. Now, isn't that huge? Who would have thought that, okay, I am contributing to this open source software, so all right, fine, someone might end up using it. But indirectly, their contributions and what they have done has really helped, reach to the other parts of the world as well. Sir, I know you have your hands raised up, but I have quite some time for Q&A towards the end, so would love to take that up that time. So that's one of the examples there as well. When you just look at what's happening or how open source is impacting space. Here is another example where, if you look closely, there is a doctor who is looking on his phone and his laptop, etc. Now, this is an example of the Tele-ICU project, and this is something which is a part of the Open Healthcare Network that was built right here in India and emanated from the state of Kerala, where what started off to help address all of the issues around oxygen, bed allocation, and everything else that many of us might have faced during COVID. Now became a much larger project called the Open Healthcare Network, which is really helping healthcare providers, primary, secondary, tertiary, really provide quality healthcare irrespective of where they are located. So this example is where a doctor sitting in one part of the country can really advise and provide inputs to to the primary treating doctor or to patients in other part of the country. So a lot of things, of course, happened during COVID, and this creation of this new project and this healthcare network is something really, really amazing that's helping in multiple different ways. So it's not just space, it's not just health, it's not just some of those industries which might be a little bit tangential to how to how our everyday life might be or how open source might be. But if you look at it in something much more closer to you as well, it's impacting even education. So I know you can't see that screenshot clearly enough, but that's a screenshot of the Canvas LMS, which is again a learning management system, which is being used by a whole lot of organizations and academia and even just trainers, etc., to deliver learning content. Again, something which is open source, which can be used by various different organizations. So it's really helping even the growth and spread of knowledge for everyone alike. Again, another example is UPI itself, right? So many of us might have, of course, used some or the other UPI platform or etc. But UPI as a stack, as a technology, also heavily uses open source to really make all of this work. So if you're thinking about how fast transactions are and how transactions are happening at scale, the last I checked on the NPCI site, I think they're doing almost 8 billion transactions every month or so. So supporting really big scale of financial transactions is also having and using open source software to make all of this happen. Something that all of us might have encountered in our daily lives, right? Right from just purchasing anything to even large ticket transactions. Similarly, if you think about this, well, in case you're not able to see, that's a Mercedes-Benz car. I don't know which model it is, so please don't ask me. But it is not just, again, also about the kind of industries where you typically see software being used, but also the kind of industries like automobile, like Mercedes-Benz, who are again making heavy use of open source, and not just using open source, but some of these people, like how I mentioned with Canvas or with TeleICU and Open Healthcare Network, or even Mercedes-Benz, are contributing back open source to the rest of the world as well, so that it's it helps other people with whatever work they are doing. Who could have really thought that open source in automobile industry is something that is very much a reality. Similarly, again, another example is this. How many of you know this? Exactly. So Prince of Persia, all right, an example of, it of course is very nostalgic to those who have played, where you would have to insert 3-4 floppies to make it work. Is also something that's very big in the gaming industry. So a lot of game developers and game studios also are not just using open source, but contributing back their own libraries as well. So in fact, the last I checked, I think the creator of Prince of Persia had released the open source version of Prince of Persia on GitHub as well. So maybe if you want some more nostalgia and play that again, you can go look that up. So we've really spoken about things like space, things like health, education, finance, automobile, gaming. What else could be left? There's a whole lot more, but let's not go into that. The final examples I want to share is this. Again, maybe it's not clear for you, but this is again some of the modules that are part of what is called as the Digit platform for e-governance. All right. So again, it's a complete e-governance solution that was developed by the e-governance foundation right here in India to make it easier for government and government bodies to deliver services to citizens. So there are multiple aspects and modules like water, property, paying bills, and whatnot, etc. So there are a lot of examples when it comes to just governance itself, and also citizen services for for everyone, that's being used as well as made open source by bodies or by government itself, right? So again, this Digit as a platform is also open source, where outside of the team that's working on it, they're also actively open for contributions and happening in the open. Again, the last thing is, and I can confidently share this example because I'm sure all of us have had good lunch, otherwise you would have probably run out by now, is example even like Zomato, all right? Where if you're thinking of e-commerce transactions or even such kind of services like your Zomato or Swiggy or anyone else as well, who are also not just using open source but contributing back as well. So a lot of these organizations, even from India, of course, be it Zomato or be it Cred or anyone else, are giving back a whole lot to open source as well by open sourcing some key components or their design libraries or a few other ways of how they make their service operate and happen available to the public, so that other organizations and teams can use it to grow themselves. And not just this, but you can find a whole lot of concrete examples when it comes to even things like agriculture. So there are a lot of projects, in fact, which aims to enable engineers and developers to help farmers to have smart agriculture. So it could be things like your open GIS systems, or multiple other things like a whole lot of databases and libraries which can really impact farmers. So I think these examples are just a very, very small tip of the iceberg of how open source is impacting every aspect of our daily life, and not just in the way that, okay, it's being used, but also where it's happening in the open. It's being developed in the open, from space to health to education to finance to automobile to gaming to governance to e-commerce to even agriculture. In fact, I would probably very confidently say that if you were to just look around, anything around you that uses some sort of a technology, it is probably being powered by open source, or has some use of it, or was able to be made, manufactured, or operated because of open source. So this is, I think, something that's really key, and how it impacts the way that all of us work in open source. So this gives you again an idea of how and what is happening here. But I'm sure you're probably thinking about, okay, fine, this is a good use of open source. Everyone is using it for multiple different applications and whatnot, etc. But who is really contributing to it, or what is happening when it comes to contributions around open source? All right. So in fact, there are a few stats that I want to share over the course of the next few minutes that will give you a much clearer picture specifically about the kinds of contributions or the technologies, etc. And the first thing is, if you were to look at just last year, all right, there was almost a 20% increase in contributions from the previous years in open source project in 2022. Just in that 1 year, there was a 20% increase in contributions that was happening to open source projects. And if you were to look at, okay, what does this look like in terms of numbers? How big is this contribution like, right? Because we might be thinking that, oh, there's very good open source softwares out over there, but we hear of very less people who are contributing or giving back, etc. Think again, because the scale at which it happens is really, really huge. An example is this. Just in 2022 alone, just last year, there was more than 400 million open source contributions. All right. So if you're thinking about, do people really contribute to open source? If this number does not satisfy you, let me tell you how much this is in context. 400 million is on an average 13 contributions every second. That's another 13 there. That's another 13 there. All right. And so on. Okay. So really, really lot of contributions that are happening across the world when it comes to open source software. All right. So there is a lot that's happening in this ecosystem outside of just usage, saying that, okay, I'm going to be using this software for so and so things, or for whatever it is that I'm interested in. There's a lot of giving back also that's happening to make to really help the open source ecosystem grow. So when I say the open source ecosystem that's growing, it's not just in terms of contributions, but also in terms of communities and what's happening across the world. So in fact, we've seen that developer communities are growing everywhere in the world. In fact, we've seen communities growing even in places where we probably did not expect for developer communities to grow as well. So there have probably been only 2 places so far in the world where we did not see developer communities growing. Any guesses what those 2 places could be? Not really. Okay, I don't know if we are still able to track contributions on Mars. Well, no, it's not open source India. We see contributions increasing here. Did my machine go off? No. Can you switch the screen, please? All right. So I think one of them is right. What someone mentioned, called out. Antarctica is definitely one place where we saw developer communities not growing. And there is a reason why, we went ahead and then investigated as to why developers are not growing here and who are those developers who are already there. It turns out there were researchers on a ship, oceanographic researchers who were collaborating on their research while sitting in Antarctica and GitHub, and they hopped back on a ship to get back. So that's why developer communities, kind of reduced in Antarctica. And the second place was a bit surprising, to me as well, because it's not a very common place that a lot of folks would have heard of. And in fact, when we came across that first, we had to see where is this place? And apparently it's a place called as the Norfolk Island, very beautiful place, somewhere between Australia and New Zealand, where the population itself is very, very small. And in fact, these 2 are the only places where we did not see developer communities grow. But in every other part of the world, even the ones where you would have guessed that probably it's not growing, developer communities have been growing in all of these regions. So isn't that interesting and fascinating? Places that you would have thought that there's nothing much happening, there is a whole lot happening when it comes to open source and contributions as well. So what are really developers building with? All right, now it's a question that 400 million contributions, so many hundreds of millions of developers, etc. What are they really using? What are they really building with? What does that framework or language, or what does it really look like? Now let me give you some more insights into this, which can some of it which could be surprising based on what you think folks are using. Some of it could be new to you, but there are more than 500 primary languages that were used to build software on GitHub last year. All right, 500. I bet, including me, if you were to try and name some of the languages, that could easily probably be less than 50 or maybe max 100, but a whole lot of languages that developers are using to build software on GitHub. And last year it was more than 500. And when I say primary languages, how a whole lot of projects these days could have multiple languages, right? So, for example, you are using maybe JavaScript for something, you're using Python for something else, and you're using shell scripts, etc. It's all mixed, right? So typically when you go on GitHub, on the repository towards the right, you would see a percentage split of languages, etc. So the topmost language is the primary language, where you can find most of the code written in. So a lot of languages that developers are using to build software on GitHub as of last year. And if you were to just put this a little bit more visually, all right, I don't know if there are any screens on either of the sites, but I'm gonna just show this visualization to you to just get an idea of what this really looks like. So again, if you want to take a closer look, you can. Otherwise, I'll tell you where to find this. So this is how languages on GitHub have been growing since Q1 of 2020, the first quarter of 2020. All the way to the right is Q1 of 2023. So you can see that, of course, JavaScript has been at the top over the past 3 years, with with kind of the most usage, followed by Python and Shell, etc. And you can see some very interesting trends based on what you really want to kind of look at. For example, you can see that for some reason CMake has been increasing over the past few years, and similarly some of the other languages. But it's been kind of pretty stable how a whole lot of developers and what are the languages that they've been using as well. My favorite one, which I code in, I can see that declining, which is Ruby. But of course, it's been pretty stable, otherwise. So a lot of languages, and this list can go on as well. So this is one example of what really developers are building with. And why I'm mentioning this is some of these changes of what are the languages that people are really using. It gives you some insight into the kind of software that's being developed. So you can probably think that, hey, there's not much that's happening because JavaScript, Python, and all of those are interestingly similar, but probably there is some reason why CMake has been increasing as a language that's being used. So these will kind of give you some more insights into the kind of softwares that developers are choosing to build these days. Now, we have of course spoken a whole lot about individual developers, contributors, etc. But organizations are also playing a really huge role in open source today. And in fact, last year, some of the largest open source projects on GitHub were either owned, were led, or maintained by companies and organizations. All right. So that seems to be what a whole lot of developers are preferring, contributing to and also growing on. So let's just take a look at an example of what that looks like. So sorted by the number of contributors, these are the top 10 project contributions from the previous years in open source project in 2022. Just in that 1 year, there was a 20% increase in contributions that was happening to open source projects. And if you were to look at, okay, what does what does this look like in terms of numbers? How big is this contribution like, right? Because we might be thinking that, oh, there's very good open source softwares out over there, but we hear of very less people who are contributing or giving back, etc. Think again, because the scale at which it happens is really, really huge. Contributions from the previous years in open source project in 2022, just in that 1 year, there was a 20% increase in contributions that was happening to open source projects. And if you were to look at with individual developers and contributors alike as well. So, one of the last things that I want to share about is, how many of you know what are topics on GitHub? Have you heard of that? It's probably less known or less used, but many of the repositories are often tagged. So whenever you go to a repository and you see what's the description, you can see some sort of tags below that, all right? So those tags help all of the developers discover other open source projects which are related to similar topics, okay? So those are called as topics, and those give you some sort of an insight into what developers really are working on and the kind of projects, etc. So if you were to look, again, a similar chart where, it's from Q1 of 2020 to Q1 of 2023, you can see that surprisingly over the past few years, the topic name config seems to be, on the top, followed by GitHub config, etc. So again, a possible indicator that a whole lot of developers who are working are probably working on some sort of configuration related repositories and projects. It's October, and there is again a program called Hacktoberfest where a whole lot of developers contribute, and you can see how that impacts as well. For example, you can see the pink line, which is the Hacktoberfest one, go up and down, etc. Right, and the peak is usually the October quarter, the Q4 quarter, where a whole lot of developers are participating in it. So similarly, you can see a whole lot of interesting trends in the kind of projects that people are working on and really contributing to as well. So a lot of interesting stuff that's happening. It's not just one thing or the second or the third thing, but a whole lot more that's going on. Lastly, it's not just about building open source, consuming open source, or what contributors and what developers are working on, but it's also working in such a way that it really helps with security. It helps make open source secure together. It's not just the maintainers or the contributors, etc. So for example, last year we saw developers update more than 50% more vulnerable packages than in 2021. All right. Now what it means is that developers are much more they're much more cognizant of vulnerabilities within their own softwares and what they are using as dependencies, and going ahead and fixing that to make things a lot more better for everyone. So what that looks like in numbers is just this 50% more fixes really helps secure 18 million projects on GitHub. So looking at it comparatively, in 2021, there were around 16 million vulnerabilities and dependencies that were updated. 2022, that's 24 million. So that really helped grow the number of projects from 13 million to 18 million and growing, of course. So it's not just about how I said the industry where open source is being used or contributed to, or how organizations are using, or how contributors are doing, or what they are doing with, or the scale at which it's happening, but also fundamentally security, because that's a key part of the open source as a culture itself. Lastly, I want to share that it's never too late to participate in open source. It could be a small contribution that's of interest to use, a small pain point that you probably want to go ahead and have it addressed and fixed in the software that you're using, or starting a career where you're working in an organization that really supports you to build stuff on top of open source or contribute back to open source. So I know there is a lot that I mentioned about the impact of open source and what's happening when it comes to not just India but also worldwide as well. But there are a few interesting, just a couple of interesting things that I want to share. So a wild guess, how many developers you think are in India? Wild guess. And of course, we know how many developers are there on GitHub. It could be more, it could be less. But anyone wants to take a wild guess? I heard as 1 billion. I really wish a 1 million, okay. 11, 20, 100. Oh, I again, that's something I really wish. But all right, 5 to 10, okay. A lot of folks are close by. I wish I had something to give you, but as of Q1 of 2023, as of like March, there are close to 11.4 million developers on GitHub in India. Now, if you are not able to again understand the extent of how big this is very, very close, a little bit less though, but very, very close to the estimated population of Bangalore. And if you're not able to still get an idea of how big this is, please cross the conference center and get a cab or something and just go around Bangalore. You'll get an idea of how much 11, 10 million will look like. All right. So really large number of developers who are building on GitHub and who are, really, really contributing to software. There are close to 30 million repositories that are owned by Indian developers. This gives you the extent of the number of software projects that developers in India are really using. Again, it's not just about the individuals or the projects, but also organizations where there are close to 440,000 organizations from India who are either teams who are building together, or businesses, or organizations, or academia, etc. But essentially organizations from India who are again kind of collaborating and working on. So finally, there is a last thing that I want to share. Is again, I'm very, very excited to share with all of you that most of what I have shared right now is a part of one of our new initiatives to make such data accessible to a whole lot of people around the world, either for research or for policy purposes, etc. And all of this is available on GitHub's new innovation graph, where if you go to innovationgraph.github.com, you can explore a whole lot of data around how the world is building software together on GitHub, be it with certain economies or be it together as a whole. So that's it for now. Thank you everyone.